All right. Okay. Oop, hold on. Okay. We should be live now. So how is everyone doing tonight? We're all good? All right, so hello to everyone here and to everyone watching at home. My name is Mallory Murphy, and I am the co-founder and executive director of Generation Activism. Tonight, we are joined by Kim Eppehimer, who is the president and CEO of the Friendship House, and who also does a lot of work with the Hope Center in Wilmington. We are going to be talking about homelessness today, what we can do to help, all the questions that we have about it. So we're really excited to have this conversation, and I'll start by passing the introduction to Mallory.
Hi, I'm the other Mallory. I'm Mal Holloway. I'm co-founder and communications director of Generation Activism. I'm super excited to hear about this project. I'm going to pass it to Kate.
Hello, I'm Kate. I go by the pronoun she, her, and I'm the advocacy director of Generation Activism, and I'm going to pass it off to Margaret.
Hi, I'm Margaret. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the secretary of GENACT, and I'm going to pass it to Sean.
Hi, I'm Sean. I go by he, they. I'm just a common member, but I'll pass it to Chelsea.
Hi, I'm Chelsea. My pronouns are she, her, and I'll pass it to Krista.
Hi, I'm Krista. My pronouns are she, her. I'll pass it to Yuritsi.
Yuritsi, I don't know if you heard Krista pass to you.
Sorry, it froze for a minute. Hi, my name is Retzi. My pronouns are she, her, and I'll pass it to Megan.
Hi, I'm Megan. My pronouns are she, her, and I'll pass it on to Linda.
Hi, I'm Linda, and my pronouns are she, her. I'll pass it on to Olivia.
Hi, my name is Olivia. My pronouns are she, her, and I'll pass it to Liv.
Hi, I'm Liv. My pronouns are she, her, and I'll pass it to Gabby.
Hello, I'm Gabby. My pronouns are she, her, and I'll pass it to Janie.
Hi, I'm Janie, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'll pass it to Bella.
Hi, I'm Bella. My pronouns are she, her. I'll pass it to Sydney.
Hi, my name is Sydney. My pronouns are she, her, and let's see. That's Sala, if I'm saying that right. Sorry if I mispronounced.
It's okay. Hi, I'm Vatsala. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm 14. And did everyone go already?
I think that was everyone.
Okay,
All
so
right.
that's everyone.
So I'll pass it to Kim for a quick introduction of herself, and then we'll jump into the questions.
Hi, I am Kim Eppehimer, and as you've learned, I'm the executive director of Friendship House. I also go by she, her, and I am completely honored and thrilled to be here with you all. Thank you so much for inviting me.
We're so excited to have you. Thank you for being here tonight. And with that, I will give it to Yuritsi to start off with our questions for the evening.
Hi, my question was how you started the Hope Center.
So that is, it's interesting. The Hope Center has been an amazing opportunity for the community, and there's been lots of interest in it, which I'm really, really pleased about. And I'll try to keep it somewhat short, although I'll say the story of the Hope Center is not a quick and easy one. Friendship House has been involved with the Code Purple program throughout Newcastle County for many years. And a Code Purple would happen when the overnight temperatures would drop below freezing, and it would enact emergency shelter beds so that we could not flood the shelters and also have more opportunities for people who wouldn't go into a shelter for various reasons. We did this in partnership with our faith community. And due to COVID, their buildings really remained closed. And a lot of the volunteers that we worked with had, either due to age or other reasons, were very vulnerable should they have gotten COVID. So we knew we couldn't do our winter programming. And the county was aware of this. And at the same time, they also knew that they needed to add more shelter beds to the system. So they purchased the Sheraton Hotel, which is now called the Hope Center, and they invited us to run our winter program, our Code Purple program, out of it. So we did that starting December 15th, and winter, generally our program ends when winter ends. We'll go as late as March 31st. But as winter is coming to a close, they realized the value that we brought to the program at the Hope Center, and they've invited us to stay throughout the next couple of years to continue running that program. So that's what took us to the Hope Center.
Thank you so much. I'll pass it to Chelsea.
Hi. How did you start to get involved with the homelessness?
You know, I feel that I've always been interested, maybe even intrigued by those who are street level living. And growing up, to me, homelessness was those that lived on the street. And as you'll learn, Friendship House defines homelessness differently. So it was one of those things that I always had a sensitivity to, but it wasn't something that I was drawn to in terms of career choice per se. I was one of those very fortunate ones to stumble across my career now. So several years ago, I started at Friendship House as a volunteer and completely fell in love with the organization. And at the same time, they had a part-time position available for a volunteer coordinator, and they invited me to apply, and I received that position. And then from there, I had more opportunities, became full-time, and I started working closely with the executive director, who then announced that he was retiring, and I was invited to apply to that position, and then I was hired. So I didn't really search it as much as kind of stumbled into it, but I am incredibly grateful that I have. I am certainly a different person because of it, hopefully a better person because of it, and have a much, much stronger and better understanding of homelessness now because of my journey.
Thank you. I'll pass it to Sean.
Hi, my question was, can you describe the work you do for the Hope and Center and Friendship House?
Yes. So I'll start a little bit with a quick summary of Friendship House. So Friendship House has been around for more than 30 years, working with those who are experiencing homelessness. And we do like to make sure we define it that way. Someone who's experiencing homeless isn't necessarily a homeless person. They're more than that. And that's an important distinction. And also, not everyone who is necessarily houseless is always homeless, which I'll also kind of get into a little bit. So Friendship House has many programs. We have the clothing bank, which gives free clothing out to the community, and also has a job training program for women who are coming out of prison. We have transitional housing, and that's 12 houses for men and women. We have space for those who have custody of children as well, but we don't really have it set up well for families per se. And that's designed for people who are coming out of a rehabilitation situation like prison or drug and alcohol, and they need more time to focus on their journey and their recovery. And so they can stay with us for up to a year. It's a very holistic program, lots of wraparound services, very individualized, and it's also cheaper than if they were living in a market rate hotel or apartment. And then we have empowerment centers, and they're kind of drop-in centers. Anybody can come for almost any reason. And we have a plethora of services there. It's sometimes a good starting point for somebody who's newly experiencing homelessness, who's recently ended up on the streets, or maybe is cycling close to that point. We'll try to prevent them from losing their housing. And so at the Hope Center, we kind of combined a lot of that. So we sort of have aspects of our transitional housing, aspects of the empowerment centers that are there. The focus of the Hope Center is to, again, extend the shelter bed system. So there's more options for people who are street level living or on the brink of becoming street level living. And that is the focus then that Friendship House does, is we first focus on getting them stable. You know, if you're in that situation where you're cycling in and out of homelessness, it is deeply traumatic. So we don't expect someone to come to the Hope Center prepared immediately to find housing. We want to get them stable. And then from there, we'll start working on their plan of how they might be able to secure stable housing. So that's what we do at the Hope Center.
Thank you. I'll pass it off to Olivia.
What factors do you believe could most likely lead to homelessness, and how can we as a community help prevent this?
Yes, and that is a very complicated answer. There's not one perfect answer to that. So Friendship House defines homelessness as someone who's lost their community. If you think about a time when you've really suffered or struggled or been in a dark place, typically, I'm guessing what's pulled you out of that is friends, your family. You have a community who loves you and supports you, and that prevents you from losing the things that are around you. So if you have somebody who maybe has lost their housing or even lost their job, you have somebody who maybe is living a different lifestyle that their family doesn't agree with, you have somebody who is in a place where they are suffering from a substance abuse disorder, things which they need help with. If their community around them, their family, their friends disagree or aren't able to see a solution, then they might get abandoned. And that usually is the trigger for someone to become homeless. And so Friendship House becomes the community around them. We sort of help fill that gap, and we love them and support them to get people to where they need to be. So in our opinion, in order to really minimize or to try to even prevent homelessness, it's to make sure that people have that loving and supportive community around them. So a lot of things that happen that cause someone to be homeless, what causes someone to lose their community? I think behavioral health is one of those things. So if somebody's acting very differently, uncomfortably, if someone is not getting the help that they need, if they're not on a medication or they're not seeing someone that could work through those issues, then those around them may not know how to handle it and they may get abandoned that way. We do find that substance abuse is another one. It could be due to not getting the help they need. It could be due to the fact that they end up putting their life savings into their addiction. There's a lot of reasons that substance abuse can get somebody to that level of street level. And sometimes it's just a lot of very unfortunate situations. And some of them can be extreme, some of them can be sort of not the most common reason. But if you end up owing fortunate funding, money into something, let's say you get a bill you just can't pay and it becomes excessive, then you might lose your housing because of that. So there's lots of different factors that go into something that becomes experiencing homelessness. And as for what you can do, that again, there's not just one solution. And that's one of the most difficult things about our job. So one thing you can do is to understand what homelessness is and try not to judge someone who's in that moment. If you are fortunate and in a place that you can be part of somebody's community to help them get out of homelessness, that's an amazing opportunity. And of course, I'm going to be presumptuous that you have resources, whether it's clothing, food, or other, then being able to give to an organization that is helping to solve homelessness would be another good way. Of course, volunteering so you can learn more about the different options is always a good thing too.
That was great. Thank you. I'll pass it on to Margaret. Hi, my question is, how has COVID affected your job, and have you seen a major increase in families needing help during the pandemic?
Yes. COVID has been horrible. There's just no way to get around it. It's been torturous for just about everybody, and we were not exempt from that. So, we've been pretty fortunate in some ways. We were fortunate that our staff were able to avoid getting COVID, as far as we can tell. We were very fortunate that we were able to stay open. So even though we closed aspects of our programs in order to keep people safe, we never actually closed down. And so we're really fortunate about that. We're also fortunate that our donors really kept supporting us. So we didn't have to stop. We never had to let anybody go. We were never worried about funding. So those things were pretty important to keep things active. But where it negatively affected is those that are living on the street pre-COVID. They created a system for themselves. They knew where they could go to get shelter, either during the day or the night. They knew where they could access food, water, and importantly, where they could use the restrooms. And when COVID hit, all of those resources shut down. All the places they would go for refuge to wash their hands, to use the restroom, were closed to them. And so now they were really struggling. So one of the things we had to do very early was find ways to mitigate that. So we worked with the county to have outside porta potties with hand washing stations. Very early in the pandemic, they were begging everybody to wash hands. Well, how do you do that if you don't have access to running water? So that was one thing we did very quickly. We also made sure that the most important resources, food and water, were available to those that we served. It was draining, it was tiring, it was something that all the staff had to get together to make sure we did well and made sure we did it safely. And we also made sure there are options for staff who weren't able to be there. You know, we have some that were in the vulnerable age group or had underlying health issues. So we gave them other options and they worked from home. Ultimately, though, COVID helped us grow in some ways. We had an opportunity to create a fourth empowerment center, and it also gave us the opportunity for the Hope Center, which I think is one of the blessings that's come out of COVID. But it definitely has had a significant effect on those who are experiencing homelessness. We have seen the numbers tick up. So there is a centralized intake system for anybody who's experiencing homelessness or has any kind of a need. There's a central intake system, and the numbers of people calling those phone numbers have gone up throughout the entire pandemic. We see new people who are living on the street and hundreds, if not thousands, of more people who are asking for financial help as well as shelter beds. So those numbers have absolutely increased for singles and for families.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting. I think I'm going to pass it to Mallory Murphy.
Yeah, thank you for all the answers so far. Just kind of riding off of that last question, just the unemployment crisis, before I get into my question, the unemployment crisis is just like, has been so like a level that this country has like barely ever seen before. So do you think that has like a really major impact on the families, that like their job was keeping them above that line, and then once they lost that opportunity are just like falling below it?
Yep, absolutely. Study after study has showed that many families don't have savings to weather these type of storms. So as soon as they stopped working, they didn't have anything to lean on. And a lot of the families couldn't help each other. So their support system was crumbling around them. It has had a significant impact. There are many, many people who are at the Hope Center and in shelters across the state, if not across the country, who have never experienced this before. It's heartbreaking. The other challenge too is that people who have gone in and out of experiencing homelessness have a sense of what to do. They'll know who to call. They know how the system can help support them. For those who have never gone through this before, when you have this many people, the systems are getting overwhelmed and people don't know where to go to get help. And that's been a challenge too. So there's even more help out there and people don't even know that it exists. But the numbers have gone up incredibly and it is very detrimental.
Yeah, that's what I mean, I assume that was the answer. Just interesting to hear from your perspective. But my question was related to a recent news story that I think has affected a lot of our members personally, just because it feels so personal. We saw the death of Sarah Everard take place over in the UK. And although it did not take place here, I think it just really felt very personal to a lot of people on so many levels. And it reminded me, and I'm sure it reminded a lot of people, that the streets are not a safe place for women to be. Whether they are just walking through or whether that is their only place to go. So I was wondering what the Hope Center and the Friendship House kind of does to help women who maybe have been harmed while they were on the streets, or if you have any preventative measures for when they're going back onto the streets to protect them from those kind of situations.
It is heartbreaking. And I will say that it is difficult for a lot of people, not just women as well. I mean, there's many groups that are targeted or many that are more vulnerable than others per se. And it is very difficult. Although not related to homelessness directly, because I don't think those things are connected. You know, generally speaking, people who are living on the street and who are experiencing homelessness are safe. In terms of they're not out to get anybody, and people are sometimes scared of them, and there isn't a reason. They're human beings just like us. But in terms,
I just didn't want there to be any miscommunication. I didn't mean that they were the ones to harm people. I just meant that homeless people, women who are experiencing homelessness, might be at risk for more.
And they are. So, and not to get into too much of the really ugly pieces of it, but unfortunately, women tend to be targeted a lot, and they can get into very uncomfortable relationships that they don't have the ability to get out. So if somebody is in a substance abuse situation, that can be abused by somebody else who might give them the drugs that they want, and now they're really tied to that person and they feel they don't have any other help or hope. Human trafficking, even though that is something that gets everybody, is very targeted on women, and that is something that's very prevalent in Delaware, and it's very overwhelming. We don't have any very direct resources for people, what we do is try to ensure that we get them the help they need that's around that. So we encourage people to make smart choices and to be thoughtful. And when we are working with people, if for any reason we have to ask them to leave our housing, for example, we make sure they have somewhere else to go. We never put somebody out on the street. At the Hope Center, that is an opportunity too, because it's 24/7 coverage. We're there all the time. And a lot of the other hotels where people are put in this situation where they're there on a hotel or a motel voucher, they don't have case management there all the time. And sometimes they don't have people there. So I think there's a lot of concern on safety. So much so that now they're trying to get more families at the Hope Center because there's more help, more resources in that regard. But one of the things we try to do is education, and it's really important that we try to connect people to the systems that exist. Delaware has a really nice system where they connect something called Hero Help to the police department. And that is an agency that's now available to people outside of just that. So if we have someone who needs additional help or we have concerns about who is street level, they can also help in those situations. But we don't have any direct resources. We rely on those around us to help those that are the more vulnerable that might be street level.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I'll pass it to Linda for her question.
How does the prison system affect homelessness in America?
Wow, that's another loaded one. There is no easy answer to that one. Many ways. Although there are attempts to try to improve it, I think one, we over incarcerate. And so that's a big issue. And when you are already poor or already in a tough situation, then you have things that are really stacked against you. You know, clearly you can't post bail if that's even an option. And then once you're in prison, all those resources you might have been working on that maybe you have are going to start dwindling away. You really can't work, although you can do some work stuff in prison. You can't accumulate a lot of savings while you're there. There's also judgment. So when you're released, it's really hard to find employment because people will have certain judgments about those who've been incarcerated. And there's some things, some felonies that can really prevent you from getting employment. For a lot of those people who come out, whether it's for a short or a long amount of time, they've really lost just about everything. So one example would be people who come out of prison tend to not have their state ID anymore. Either it was confiscated, it was lost, somehow they left it behind and it wasn't on their person when they were arrested, so it's not at the prison. And when you've lost your ID, it can be really hard to get it back again. And so that's one of the things that Friendship House does is they work with people to get their IDs. You need an ID and a birth certificate for almost any service that exists in Delaware or any other state, and you need one to get the other. So if you don't have one of those, it's really hard. If you don't have both, it's almost impossible. So we've worked out a system with the state that we can vouch for people when we know who they are. We can use our own IDs. We can create them a Delaware or a Friendship House ID and replace to try to get their ID. But that's one example where when someone comes out of prison, if they don't have an ID, they can't do anything. And if there isn't an organization that can help pick them up and help with that, that will lead them to homelessness if they don't have somewhere else to go.
Thank you. I'm going to move the conversation to Liv.
So my question for you is, are there any mental health resources at the Hope Center?
Yes. So we are not the only ones that are at the Hope Center, even though we sort of act as the hub and sort of the main organization that's really focused on getting everybody the resources they need. There's a lot of resources that they need. And so at the Hope Center is something called the Bridge Clinic. And the Bridge Clinic is run by DSAM, which is the Delaware Substance Abuse and Mental Health Organization. And their goal is to connect people to more resources, but they also have what's called peer specialist. They have licensed therapists, and they have a lot of other resources under their organization. And so they are actually on site at the Hope Center every day. And so when we have somebody who might be getting into a crisis, or if we know that they have behavioral health issues, we can refer them immediately to the Bridge Clinic, and they'll do an intake almost immediately on them. So that's been a huge blessing and a major opportunity for people who are there. again, as people are coming into the Hope Center, they've been through something traumatic to get there. And to be able to have someone who can start talking them through that process, through what they've just gone through, is a really huge opportunity, let alone those that have been maybe cycling for some amount of time.
Thank you. That's really great to hear. I'm going to pass it to Mallory Holloway.
Hi again. So you kind of already answered this question roughly throughout a couple different questions, but does the Hope Center provide any specific resources to kind of mobilize and help people specifically find jobs?
Yes, although not a lot right this exact moment. We have plans for a lot more on site, but we work with the Department of Labor, for example, and we work with other organizations that we knew have job training programs to try to connect people to that, because they're going to need to have that income before they can really find a stable place to live. So we focus on getting them stable, and we focus on getting them employed before we focus on getting them housed. Kind of sort of post-COVID and maybe even later this year, there's some really neat ideas they have that they want to do there at the Hope Center for job training opportunities. And this was a full functioning hotel, and they have a beautiful kitchen. And so perhaps there's a way to use that as, culinary or other training opportunities. There are large conference rooms. We could easily do both virtual and in-person trainings. There's things on site they can do. They can help with the grounds. Maybe they can help learn engineering by being either in an internship or volunteering with the hotel staff. So there's many opportunities, and we're starting to explore many of them.
Yeah, thank you. That's definitely interesting. I think I'm going to pass the conversation over to Megan.
Hi. So I follow Matt Meyer on Instagram, and I know he's associated with the Hope Center. So the other day I saw a post that you had your first move out, and now I can't find it. So am I dreaming that, or did you have your first move out?
We did. It is so it's a neat story. And I have to give a significant shout out to Matt Meyer and the whole Newcastle County Council, because they are the reason the Hope Center is there. It was an amazing plan. He supported it wholeheartedly, and the entire council voted 13-0 in favor of the Hope Center. So it is just a tremendous effort they've all put forth. So I thank him profusely. So yes, we've actually had two people move out. One was the one you're thinking of, and then there was a mother and a daughter that moved out recently. And the one that you're thinking of, her name is Melissa. She was early, I think she came in January. I can't remember exactly when she was referred to us. But one of the things she said that kind of really worked out was by being able to come into this environment and really be able to find stability, she was able to remember that she had this Section 8 voucher, or she was on this list for Section 8. And by her being stable in the same place, they were able to also locate her. So she found them and they found her, and they said, "We've been trying to reach out to you. We have a Section 8 voucher for you. There is an apartment that you can move into." And so if it hadn't been for her ability to get to the Hope Center and be able to find that level of just ability to even take a moment to think and to be reminded that she had this Section 8 list, was huge. So she did move out, and so far it's only been a few weeks, but she's doing very well.
Thank you so much, and a big congratulations to you. And I'm going to move it back to Mallory Holloway.
Okay, so my next question is actually from, I don't know if she's viewing it right now, but Natalie Edwards. So what are the requirements needed to get a bed at the Hope Center? And are there any attributes that would force you to turn someone away?
So right now, the only way to get to the Hope Center is through the Housing Alliance 1833 Find Bed hotline. And so what they do is they have a list of all of the shelters in the state. And if somebody needs a shelter bed, they're asked to call that, and they do a quick survey to find out what the needs are, and they try to place that individual or family in the best fit shelter and what is available. When there isn't any other shelter beds available, then they will refer that person to the state service center, and they run the hotel motel voucher system. And so when there aren't any other shelter options, which right now there's very few to none because of COVID especially, then the state service center issues them a voucher, which will pay for that person to be in a hotel. And the Hope Center is part of that system. So you have to have a voucher in order to come stay at the Hope Center. And really, there's not a lot of reasons that someone wouldn't be able to be there. There are some rules that people have to be able to follow. And typically right now, they're trying to cater to families. But I think one of the big things is just the way that it's set up and the resources that are on site. We really just need people to be able to take care of themselves. So if they have significant physical issues or mental disabilities, they may not be able to, that may not be an option for them. But otherwise, we take the vouchers as they're referred to us. So Friendship House doesn't decide who stays at the Hope Center. We accept whoever is given to us and we work with them starting day one.
Thank you. You did a really good job answering that question. That's really interesting. I think the next question is Bella.
I was wondering how you receive the funding to provide your services.
Yeah. So Friendship House, again, we've been around for over 30 years. We've always been publicly funded by individual donors, faith partners, businesses, and foundation grants. We've never done government funding. We are a coalition of churches. That's how we're registered with the IRS, although it's various faiths that support us. But that's always been our primary source of funding. And then over the past many years, the individual donations has increased. And so that's been becoming almost the bigger part of how we get funding. And then we do grants and we solicit funding from businesses. There's lots of ways. Fundraising is a very, very big part of our job at Friendship House, and partially because we don't do government funding. So we really need to depend on the community in order to support our programming. The exception, however, is now the Hope Center. So one of the interesting things when we were invited to come to the Hope Center to run our Code Purple program, the county said, with the CARES Act funding, we can fund your program there. And we said, that's great, except we don't do government funding. So we went to the board and had a very lengthy conversation about it, and they realized that it's more important for us to do this program than to worry about how it's being funded. But the government funding we accept only is for the Hope Center program. All of the other Friendship House programs remain funded completely by the community. But the Hope Center right now is mostly, if not all, funded by government funding.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, so sorry, I'm remembering who the next question is to. It's to Kate.
So I actually had two questions, so I'll start with the first one. I know there's a big statistic of LGBT people and youth being homeless as they get, kicked out or disowned. And so I was wondering if you had any specific programs for LGBT youth and LGBT people in general.
We don't have any specific programs. We try to make sure that our programs are really suitable for anyone and everyone. So it is absolutely a deep concern, and inclusivity and understanding is one of the things we try so hard to make sure that we're focused on. It's interesting. We actually thought we would try to be so almost blind to it all that we would never get any data about someone. We wouldn't track, someone's ethnicity or someone's history or anything of that. We just wanted to know, where did you need to go? What is your journey? How can we get you there? But there's been so much good pushing towards, being more equitable and having diversity and inclusion being a piece of everything that you do. We realize that by not paying closer attention to that, we risk the fact that we're actually not doing more to be proactive about that. So we've actually recently formed a DEI committee at Friendship House, and we're taking this much more thoroughly to assess our programs and make sure that we're being as inclusive as we can. And is there something we're accidentally doing we don't even realize that's having people not feel that they are welcomed to come get services? So it is something that we're deeply aware of and concerned about, and want to make sure that people know that anyone and everyone is welcome to come to Friendship House for help. That's also true for our hiring practices, our board, our volunteers. Everyone's welcomed.
That's very interesting. And my second question was, how would you say witnessing homelessness and people in poverty has changed not only the way that you interact with those who are in poverty, but other people and like regular people and people around you in general?
Yeah, so many ways. And I think so many ways for the better, I hope. But one of the things that I have definitely learned is it is you really cannot judge anyone's situation. It doesn't do any good. And it really is hurtful if you think, even if you think you're doing something beneficial by trying to judge where they are, where they want to go, it's not useful. So it's really important to take people where they are in that moment. And it's also really important to not put your own perceived notions on that individual. It's really hard when we have social norms that we expect people to act within. And if somebody doesn't act within those norms, then they might start getting treated differently. And so we need to sort of put those aside as we're working with someone. We also don't try to tell somebody where they should go. We always ask them, where do you want to go? And then how do we get you there? So that's the other big thing I've learned is just because I know what I want or what I think is best for me, that's not going to match always the individuals that I'm working with. And so it's really important that they're the ones dictating their journey. We're just there to help get the barriers out of the way so they can stay on that journey. I think the other big thing I've learned is that no one chooses to be homeless. They certainly could make choices that aren't helping their situation. And I think a lot of times people aren't willing to let go of the things that are holding them back or putting them in the place of being homeless. But no one really is choosing homelessness. And I think that's the other big piece. So trying to really not judge, not put on any preconceived notions, and not dictating somebody the way they should live their life are the things that I've really picked up on the most.
Wow, that was a very interesting perspective on both topics. Thank you for that. And with that said, I'm going to pass the next question off to Janie.
Hi, so my question was, what is the hardest part about your job and how do you cope with all the sadness you see at work?
Oh, yes. So it's interesting because there's several pieces to my job. I think the hardest part for me is making sure that all of my colleagues have what they need to do their job well. I try to be mindful of being more of what I call a servant leader, where it's really important that I'm not at the top and have all of these employees working for me. They are my colleagues and we are peers. And it's my job to make sure they have the resources they need to go be the best version of themselves that they can be. And so sometimes it can be hard to remember that I need to give space for them to do their job. Also fundraising, not fun. It is really hard to make sure we have every dollar that we need in order to make sure that we have all the services that are met. But more on a specific programmatic piece, it's really hard when people can't get the resources they deserve. Every single person deserves to have a place they can call home. Every single person deserves a community that can love and support them. And unfortunately, we have a system that is good and it works for most people, but it doesn't work for everybody. People fall through the cracks too often. And I think for me, that is the one that's so heartbreaking. And that's why organizations like Friendship House exist. We exist to fill the gaps. We're not trying to repeat work that's being done. We're trying to do different work that others aren't doing or can't do. But we can't do it all either. We're not capable. We don't have the expertise. We don't have the funding. And so I think it's really hard when you see someone who isn't getting the help they need. It's also heartbreaking when people aren't ready to accept the help that they need. And there's really nothing we can do about it. You cannot force somebody to give in. You cannot force somebody to give up. You cannot force somebody to go do the one thing you wish they could do more than anything else. They have to decide that they're willing and ready to do that. And so I think that is also one of the most difficult parts.
Thank you so much for your answer. That was really interesting. I'm gonna pass the conversation to Gabby.
Hello, I was wondering, what is the most rewarding part about your job?
That is a perfect follow-up question. Again, there's just so many answers to that. But one is seeing somebody get to where they want to be, and I think there's so many ways and so many versions of that. When you see somebody who's been living in a homeless or houseless state for decades, finally either make the decision or get the help that they need and see them turn to a stable way of living is incredibly heart lifting. It is worth every moment of it. But I think really it's the day-to-day actions that we get to the interactions we get to have with the people that we serve. They're incredibly grateful. And it's just an amazing reminder of just how deep humanity can go. It's so easy for any one of us to be in their position. We're not that far away in a lot of ways to end up being homeless or houseless. And it's an amazing reminder just how fortunate I have been that I've had this community to love me and hold me up and not let me spiral out of control. But I think it's incredibly rewarding when someone lets you become part of their community, when someone accepts you for anything you have, for whatever it is you can offer, and they say, yeah, you can be part of that loving, supportive community. That to me is deeply rewarding.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna pass it back to Mallory.
So thank you for all of the answers. I definitely have learned a lot so far. This is definitely not something that I knew a lot about, and I'm really glad that I get to learn more throughout this. So that is all the documented questions that we have listed already. So now I'm going to open it back up to the group for any questions that they might have thought of over the course of the meeting, or they want to share any personal stories or experiences, or if they want just any comments that they want your opinion on, anything is welcome. Does anyone want to start with that? Yeah, go ahead, Mallory.
So I just also want to say thank you as the meeting's kind of wrapping up. As you know, we are an organization striving for youth education and growing as activists together. As you also know, the news has been crazy in the past couple years. A lot of terrible things also happen in the news. So what drives you as a businesswoman, and how do you stay motivated when being surrounded by, as you said before, the constant heartbreak?
Mm-hmm. It's probably similar to the answer I just gave. It is the people that I get to work with that hold us up day and day again. They are amazing to be able to not lose hope, to be able to willing to fight another day, considering what they're going through, how they're treated, the lack of resources they get is so inspiring. It makes you want to go back and keep going at it another day. It's also inspirational in a lot of ways to be a woman in the field, even though human services and a lot of nonprofits mostly have women working for them. It's still a dominated male leadership. So most CEOs in nonprofits are men. And so it is still one of those things that I have to be reminded, even though I'm a white woman, I'm still a woman. And so I do try to make sure that I show up and be an example for any other woman that thinks they can or want to be in a leadership position. So I try to be mindful of that as well. And it's also my colleagues. They're my heroes. During the entire pandemic, especially, they have showed up every day. They had the right any day to say, yeah, not going to do it. Sorry. And they didn't. And so that is just an inspiration for me too. So I really pull on those around me to be mindful. If I'm having a hard day, then they say something to remind me of why we do what we do. And that's all I need.
Yeah, thank you. And we're kind of a female-led organization, so that's really good to hear. I mean, you're just a really inspiring person. So if anyone has any other questions to add to that, I will mute myself.
I mean, personally, I just had a question. Not all of our members are from Delaware. We have members from all over the country now, but so just for the people that do live within close enough range that they can get themselves to the Hope Center, do you guys accept youth volunteers, and how can we volunteer? Or at the Friendship House, how can anyone in this organization, if they wanted to help and show up, what kind of opportunities are there for us to do?
Yes, please. So the easy one is to say you can email volunteer@friendshiphousede.org anytime. We absolutely accept people of all ages. Depending on the age, we might ask for an adult supervisor, depending on what or where it is, but we absolutely positively love volunteers. And I think that's been one of the hardest parts about the pandemic, is that we really, really miss having our volunteers. Pre-pandemic, if you include all of the groups that come to the clothing bank, we would work with over 1,000 volunteers every year. And we've been, almost nil with a lot of that. At the Hope Center, yes, we do have opportunities. You would have to, if you're under 18, you'll have to be supervised by an adult, and you have to go through the Newcastle County background check and their application. But one of the neat things you can do at the Hope Center is, so we give food out to everybody that's there. and they get 3 meals a day at one time. So they're prepackaged by a caterer that we are paying for, and then we deliver them to each of the rooms. And that was something that we have volunteers do with us. You actually get to meet the people that are at the Hope Center. And that's a really delightful experience. But we have lots of many things too. The clothing bank, especially when we get out of the pandemic, it's a great group activity to come, sort clothes, meet the women that work there. We have opportunities. You can serve dinner to our residents. Again, this is kind of post-pandemic when we're allowed to really eat together again. But that's a really fun thing to do too. It's a little more intimate. We can do it at our men's or our women's housing. And right now we do only have houses for men and for women, but it's a really neat opportunity to come and actually sit and hear the stories of how they got to where they got. And it's really powerful. So there are opportunities for everybody, all ages. We would love to have you.
Could you repeat that email one more time?
Yes, I'll put it in the chat box too, but it's volunteer at friendshiphousedE.org.
Okay, let me just write that down. So that's great to hear. I definitely personally would be interested. It sounds like a really rewarding and amazing thing to do with our time. And also I was wondering what kind of donate. Oh, Janie, you can go. Go ahead.
Are you sure?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So what, like you said about serving dinner as a like volunteer, there's actually another place in Delaware called the St. Patrick Center, and I a couple times volunteered there and served dinner. So it was really cool to see how that all works and stuff.
They are a great organization and do amazing things. I'm so glad you got to experience that.
Go ahead, Sean.
I was just going to say kind of like what Jane said. I've actually helped volunteer at the Friendship House Clothing Center, and it was a really good time, honestly.
Awesome. Thank you. Come back.
I personally, for the Martin Luther King Day of Service this year, I worked with Senator Kyle Evans Gay, and she did a feminine hygiene products drive and a bunch of other stuff that I collected and helped sort. So I was wondering kind of what stuff do you take? Like, I know I emailed you and you said you don't accept used like reusable face masks or anything like that. So I'm wondering like what kind of stuff you could really use? Like what's the most helpful donation to give?
Yes, I appreciate that. And I won't lie, money is never hurtful. We will always take any available funding, but we do need a lot of items. And it's amazing how much we can actually give based on what people are able to give us. So at the Hope Center, the Martin Luther King Drive was fantastic. We got a lot of feminine hygiene, we got diapers, but there's other things that we can really use that sometimes can be a little bit more, I don't know, fun in a way, like hot chocolate. Our clients love hot chocolate, and that's not something they can just go out and buy. So those little packets of hot chocolate, it's such a fun thing to be able to give them. On a more needed basis, at the Hope Center, we need oatmeal, instant packages of oatmeal. We can use dried snacks, bottles of water. They really enjoy having that, and it's something that they don't always need, but borderline, especially if they're working, it's really helpful for them to leave with all the snacks and water that they need for the day. At the clothing bank, we've actually started a new project where it is our goal to eventually ensure that every student has what they need clothing wise for school. And we're starting that with school uniforms. So I don't know if any of you go to a school that requires a specific clothing where you have to wear a collared shirt, like my boys do that. Do you guys have that? Do you guys have to wear a certain thing? Yeah. And so for people who are experiencing homelessness or living in poverty or even not at a livable wage, it's really hard for them to get clothing. And if they show up to school without the collared shirt or they don't have the khaki pants, they might be sent to the principal's office or sent home. And if you live in a shelter, that's not an option. So we're focused on making sure that every student is able to have what they need to get to school. So we're doing a big push for new or gently used uniform items, polos, khakis. That's a big one. But to your point, we really believe in respecting those that we serve, and be careful, because I don't want you to think, Mallory, that your gift of the reusable masks, it was very kind. But when you have something that's deeply intimate, underwear, socks, and masks, especially reusable ones, we really try to make sure that they're new, to ensure the deepest of hygiene, and also out of respect for those that we serve. Back to someone else's question, and forgive me, I can't remember who asked it, what have I learned about my job? I'll admit, I was one of those people that I would give expired food to the food bank, or if I had something that was kind of tattered that I didn't wear anymore, I'm like, oh, somebody's going to wear this. I've learned that that's not an appropriate response. Really, everyone who is experiencing homelessness deserves to look the way they want to look. And not everybody wants to wear something that looks like it came from a clothing bank. So we really do a high level of scrubbing. Sean can tell you, if he got to experience this, we go through, there's no broken buttons, there's no tears. We make sure it's just the best of quality. So when you do think about donating, if you are able to give new things, that's preferred. And if you're giving something that's used, is it something you would wear? If so, then it's worth donating. If not, then it's worth finding a recycling center that can then reuse it in other ways and repurpose it.
Yeah, I mean, just about that, that's something that I learned. I haven't volunteered very much in the homelessness kind of category. But something that I noticed when I was volunteering with Senator Gay is that a lot of the products we were collecting, people put so much thought into them, and it was really uplifting to me to see that, for example, the feminine hygiene products, people were donating like organic boxes of tampons and like the really nice quality ones, instead of just getting like the cheapest ones, like the cardboard ones, because they wanted these people to have the highest of quality, because they deserve the highest of quality just the same as the people who are able to buy them. So thank you for enlightening all of us about what we can donate, and the volunteer needed the things that you need to volunteer. I definitely am interested in helping. I hope some of our other members are interested in helping too. And I was wondering if anyone else has any more questions. Now would be the time to do that before we wrap up for the night. Okay, cool. So thank you so much, Ms. Eppehimer, for coming today. I definitely learned so much. I can say that I feel like a lot of us learned a lot today. So thank you. Does anyone else want to kind of wrap up with a quick thank you?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say that.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank
Um,
you.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is a huge opportunity for me too. So thank you, Mallory, for the invitation. And I am so impressed with all that you're doing. So keep up the good work. You are an inspiration to me, and I appreciate all that you do.
Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thanks. You too. Take care and be safe. Bye.
To all of our viewers watching at home, before I wrap up the live, I just wanted to say that if you guys want to find us on social media, our Twitter is at GENACT2, our Instagram and TikTok are generation.activism, and you can find the links needed to apply and become a member of GENACT on all of those social media sites. So if you are between the ages of 12 and 18 and live in the United States, please take a moment to consider joining us. We have